Well, hello everyone. This is Fadi, and I want to welcome you to a live stream with a fabulous guest that we had before, Dr. Cynthia, whom we had here to discuss a topic. At that time, it was street apologetics, and she shared some amazing tools, very simple tools that Christians can use when they encounter people from different backgrounds, obviously, to share the gospel with them. And we will revisit that topic at some point in the future to continue with the other tools that we didn't cover. But today we're going to have another approach called personal apologetic testimony. But before we get to the topic and before we introduce our guest, I just want to give all of you, a shout out and thank you so much for your connections, your prayers, your messages, my health update. I would say things are improving, but I will find out this week if the surgery is a success or not. From my perspective, so far, things are still almost the same, but I don't want to speculate. I'll let the surgeon decide. We have plan B, obviously, and, we'll deal with that and cross that bridge when we get there. All that to say is I'm going to make my comeback slowly into the live stream world. For instance, this week, I will have also a couple of other guests. I'm not going to announce it to be on the safe side, just in case things go south on me, health-wise and energy-wise. But that's the plan, to have two more guests at least. And when that happens, I'll be announcing it, obviously, either tomorrow, Friday, or Saturday. And thank you again for all of you who are tracking with us here today. I think today's topic is going to be very, very beneficial to many of you who are interested in witnessing to those that you meet, those that you recognize that they do not know the Lord, and maybe you are not at ease in opening the dialogue and also witnessing to them. So hopefully today's tool will at least put you at ease and help you make that step. With that in mind, I want to welcome again our guest, Dr. Cynthia. Thank you so much for being here, as always, and we value, of course, your knowledge and your experience, and especially the practical experience that you have in really reaching out Muslims and others for the gospel. Could you kindly just give our viewers a brief background about yourself and also the website where they can go and benefit from some of your teachings?
Sure, brother. I am a medical doctor who actually trained to do medical missions, but now I've ended up doing ministry in a slightly different way. It's personally bringing the gospel to Muslims, especially, and also Sikhs and Hindus and others. And so I direct American Ethnic Ministries. And pertinent to this show, we have christianfrommuslim.com. That's christianfrommuslim.com. And you can go to the lessons page there and get full training in how to connect with Muslims, share the gospel, and challenge them. Because that's our manifesto as American Ethnic Ministries. It's build bridges, share Christ, challenge falsehood. So when we work with Islam, it's build bridges, share truth, the gospel especially, and challenge Islam. So today we're going to be in a little bit of that challenging category, but it's defending the gospel. So you might come across that when you're sharing the gospel or when you're having a discussion. And the reason I would like to talk about the personal apologetic testimony today, brother, is because I feel that a lot of your viewers have been learning and learning and learning a lot. They know so much now in apologetics. And I just want to help them with a little tool or format that they can work with their knowledge, sort of like an at-home workshop right now, and come up with something that will be a tool that will help them greater. So it's to empower what they already know, rather than introduce more apologetic topics today.
That's wonderful. And that's what I enjoy about the tools you offer are very simple, but very powerful. So tell us a little bit more. What did you mean by personal apologetic testimony?
Right. Good question. I like that acronym, Personal Apologetic Testimony, PAT, because in English we will say, get it down pat. So I like to say, make your pat and get it down pat. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me give you a short story about how I realized that is what I was doing. And I would like to share that with you. So a few years ago, I was doing campus outreach on Good Friday, which I do pretty much every Good Friday. And I strongly encourage your viewers to do that, to use their apologetics. Good Friday is a great time to do it. I call it Good Apologist Friday. So get out there and talk to people and use what you know about the resurrection. Well, I was doing that once on a campus in California and sharing with someone who told me he was basically an atheistic Satanist kind of thing. So I started sharing with him why I believed the Bible and that there is a God, etc. And I started out with talking about who I am and my experience. And then I went through some facts and kind of concluded it. And afterwards I thought, you know, that is really a helpful thing. And over the next several months, I started getting the idea that we could teach people how to do that, how to make their personal apologetic testimony. And what that will do, folks, is take who you are as a person, what you know, where you are on God's playing board of life, and fit into that the things you've learned that you personally find most convincing. And to do this as a tool, as a pat, you will have surprise, beginning, middle, and end. And I want to show you how to put those together in something that will help you personally be a more effective evangelist and apologist.
That sounds great. Also, as you share with us more about this, help us learn of locations, places that this could work best, or is it everywhere you go? How can you open the door for it, for instance? Is it a next step, meaning like you start with something and you get to it? Or could this be a first step, for instance?
Okay. Hey, brother, are you taking chat questions at the moment?
I'm paying attention. If there is anyone, of course.
Yeah, if someone does want to ask a question,
absolutely,
then let me know. But I have thought that we might want to possibly look at 4 scenarios. Now, I'm not sure how much time we want to spend today, so let's focus on doing a pat to Islam, and that and the other scenarios we can talk about what they might come up in, what situation. So I'm sure your viewers are probably needing a pat for Islam. They might be needing one for atheists and secularists. And if we have time, we can also talk about doing one with Eastern religions and New Age, and then possibly in doing one for pagans and Wiccans and stuff like that, which is a little related to New Age. But for the one to Islam, your pat to Islam, you will be directing it to Muslims. And although I say this is a personal apologetic testimony, and the word person is very important in that, you always need to think, who is your audience? Who is hearing? For example, if I'm teaching something to my grandchildren, I teach it much differently than when I'm teaching in the university medical school. You have to tailor it to your audience. And those of you that have taken lessons in communication or speaking or film or anything, you've got to suit your audience. So the first thing you want to think about when you're making a pat is, who is your audience? So for this one, we're assuming it's Muslims, but remember, Muslims are at a huge different level. Some of them are way more educated than others, and some of them are harsh and others are very gentle. So you keep that in mind. Now, as far as the setting you might use it, what do you think, brother? Should we talk about the setting first, or talk about what the pat is and then how to apply it? What would be more helpful? Should we talk about how you make it so people will know kind of how you apply it?
I would say yes. I mean, give as many steps to it and components to the approach as possible, if you could.
Okay, so we're going to start out with the word personal. Okay, and that is important because this is your personal apologetic testimony. Why is that important? Well, many of us get into arguments or discussions, but argument in the philosophical way of saying it, or even in church or in philosophy, where we talk about this is true, no, this is true, no, this is true. What is a strength of the personal apologetic testimony is you are not necessarily saying this is the truth, you are wrong. You are saying what is meaningful to you as a person. And anyone out there who has studied psychology or counseling or psychiatry knows that they tell you a good way, the most effective way to express yourself about something important is to say, I feel, or my experience, because people can shoot down a fact and say that fact isn't real. But your opinion of it is a little harder to shoot down. No, I'm not saying we don't ever deal in facts. I mean, obviously, I'm a medical person, and for me, I mostly deal with facts. But for the personal apologetic testimony, you're using the strength of who you are, and that is worthy. So, as this first part, I want everybody, of course, to listen to Fadi and I, but also kind of think of who you are and how you relate to Islam or Muslims or any part of the world where Islam and Muslims are. So I can tell you how I relate. I won't give you a lot of details so that, people don't track me down in unpleasant ways, but I have a lot of friends and personal connections and family connections and business connections with the Middle East and Muslims. Plus, I've been studying Islam and Arabic for decades. So that's the basis that I'm coming from. And depending on who I'm talking to, if they are from Saudi Arabia, I will explain my connections to Saudi Arabia. If they are from another place, I will explain that. One of the things that we talk about in our Building Bridges seminar is, maybe you don't have a lot of personal connections, but you like Middle Eastern food. I mean, any kind of a connection that helps them understand who you are. It's a little bit of a bridge. And that is the first thing you would use in your personal apologetic testimony. So they know, where are these facts, these apologies coming from? Why do they appeal to you? I'm sure that most of you have heard a lot of Fadi's background and why certain things appealed to him. And just right now, take a second. I'm going to count to 10. Okay, did you get a thought? People at home, did you get a thought about how you can connect? Good. So you heard my example. You've heard Fadi in the past. And now you're thinking about how you can connect. And part of that, I think, should probably be something like, well, I've been looking into Islam for quite a while. And I've been comparing it with Christianity and other religions. So something like that, after you give like who you are and why you're interested in this. And then you can say you're studying it. And what I do for people that are taking my classes, and even you right now, I kind of declare you are students of Islam and Arabic. You are learning about it through Fadi's channel, with me, with other people. So you are a student. No, you don't lie and say you're in a class unless you are. But you can say you've taken a course. If you've gone to our conferences, or you've taken Fadi's conference. So, this gives you a little bit of, one of the words is bona fides. Another word is the ethos. If you look at a philosophical argument, the ethos is who you are. So you want this to ethos, logos, pathos, which means who you are. The logos is your information that you're going to share, and the pathos is the feeling you're going to put into it. So that's what's going to be in your personal apologetic testimony. So personal, you explain who you are, why you're interested, and then something about your studies of Islam. Okay, so that's number one of the PAT.
So if I may ask, what you're saying is, if I did not go to their country, for instance, or I don't know anything about their country, could that in and itself be a door opener for me to ask about their country, their culture, things to know about that? I mean, would that also qualify to open the door for that?
That is a really valuable skill, Al-Fadi. And actually, when I talk about paganism later, I'm going to mention that. That is a skill. Some of you maybe know about, they talk about the Columbo tactic and Greg Kokel and all of that talk about asking questions. And I really do approve of that and teach it and encourage it. But this particular skill is when maybe you're a little farther on, or you are talking to someone that you just meet even, and they know you're Christian, you know they're Muslim, you have a little discussion, and you can ask questions during that. But when you get to the point that you're going to share your PAT, at that point you're beyond questions, and you're saying who you are and what you find impressive. Now, if your people don't know anything to say about Islam, about why they follow the Bible and not Islam, then maybe they don't have a PAT yet. They need to work on getting their apologetics down. So this is mainly addressed to people who have been watching our other brothers and sisters that do apologetics, going to conferences, studying the Hadith, the Quran. I'm thinking they've got like stuff all over their brain that they've learned, and I'm just coaching them on how to use it in a PAT. So yeah, questions are great, but for this is where you're to the point where you know something and you want to discuss it. And I'll tell you where this usually comes up with Islam. And this, I know, will ring a bell with you. When you know a Muslim well enough, or even if you've just been talking, say that one day or maybe for an hour, they will often say to you, well, we believe in Jesus. We follow Jesus. We honor him as a prophet. Why don't you follow Islam? And so they are basically totally opening the door wide for your PAT. When you hear that, you go into your PAT. So, and there are other cases where you could also, but they're asking you, it's the good old 1 Peter 3:15, be ready when they ask you. So that's why you make your PAT and you get it down pat. So we'll pretend that, as often happens, let's just say I'm here with Magda or Fatima or Ahmed, and he asks me, well, why don't you follow Islam? So I will start my PAT. You kind of heard what my personal opening is. Then I will give reasons, and I'm asking our viewers for the second stage to think of 2 or 3 reasons, their top reasons for why they don't follow Islam, why they follow Jesus. So for example, do you want to make a comment on that, brother, or shall I start giving you my PAT?
No, you can definitely continue, but I want to say I was at a conference, and George Husni actually, was in one of the events that we organized together with him. And one of the brothers stood and really asked a simple question. And the question was, if I ask you right now, why aren't you a Muslim? What would be your answer? And the room was full of people, and it all of a sudden got quiet, and no one answered that question. And I was really baffled by it,
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm saying, Okay, when I went to medical school, my first year, there was so much information. I used to say, I'm standing under a waterfall, and all it's like being under Niagara Falls, and all this is coming to me, and I don't know what's important, what's not, what to do with it. There was that kind of a feeling that as I went on in medical school, I became more comfortable with what I knew and knew how to apply it. And I'm trying to give that skill to those people so that you won't have a room full of people who know a bunch of facts about Islam or things they don't like and things they do like about the Bible, but they've never really thought of putting it together. So that's what we're trying to do here. And probably, I mean, I hope the people that have been watching you have been thinking about what they find most convincing, what they like the most. And in fact, when I'm watching apologetic videos now, I'm always looking for how would that work when I actually talk to someone. I know you and Brother Jay and other people have been doing things on changes in the Quran. And I look for how can we make that simple and powerful. And I did write a book on that topic about 10 years ago. So I'm looking to see how does the new information come in. So I'm hoping your viewers have been doing that with all these ideas about Islam and the Bible. So I don't want to force anybody to use my path because all of us are different, but possibly we do have some of the same ideas. So would you like to hear my three, or do you want to give your three?
No, I want to hear yours, but I want to just welcome those who just tuned in to let us reason here. We are doing a live stream with Dr. Cynthia, and we're talking about approaches really to opening the door to share the gospel. And we're using Islam initially right now as an example for something called personal apologetic testimony. That's where you're hearing the acronym PAT right now: P as in Paul, A as in Apple, T as in Tom. And you mentioned Dr. J, and I want to just remind everybody that next week on Monday the 20th and Tuesday the 21st, I'll be in our studios with Dr. J, and we will be doing a number of recordings, but we will be doing live streams, and we are going to invite a number of the scholars that he's been inviting also on his channel, and we're going to have a panel discussion about some of the historical criticism concerning the origin of Islam. So I just want people to be aware of that, and stay tuned. We'll be sharing more details about that. Yes, please go ahead and share your examples.
Great. Okay. So for people who just turned in, personal apologetic testimony, the first part is your personal background. And then you go into what are the reasons that you personally find persuasive. So for me, the first one I use is related to what we call the path of the prophets. It's, and you can see that on the homepage of our website. We have the video tracked. I don't go through all of it at this point unless I've got a really long time with the person, but I will say, well, the first reason I don't believe is because in the Bible, God requires blood sacrifice for sin. We saw it before Abraham with Noah and Adam, and we saw it with Abraham at Eid al-Adha, and we saw it with Moses when the law was given to Moses. It included blood sacrifice for sin, and for Christians, there's blood sacrifice for sin. But when we get to Islam, where's the blood sacrifice for sin? So I feel that I tell them, God's character is not going to change. It might change the way we pray, the direction we pray, or what we wear, or even what we eat. But his character, if he demands blood sacrifice as a justice for sin, that's not going to change. And I don't see that in Islam. So depending on how much time I have, I will go into more or less detail with that. And that would lead to my second apologetic, which is reading the Bible and the Quran. They just don't seem to flow. Other things about it, the character of God, the way he approaches people, the way the prophets lived, it's just not the same. So that's a second one. And my third one, guys, this I love so much, and I feel like it's the most underutilized passage in apologetics, and that is John chapter 5. So if they say, why aren't you a Muslim? Or especially if they say, why don't you believe Muhammad? I give John chapter 5. And what's so beautiful about that is Jesus says, if I appear as my own witness, it's not valid. Okay, well, maybe you're thinking about who appeared as his own witness in this case, in difference to Jesus. But they came to Jesus asking proof. Why do you say you're from God? Why should we follow you? And Jesus gave 3 reasons. And those 3 reasons are valid today. And they are good with any offshoot or branch that says it's related to Christianity or has a prophet. So we can use it, say, with Mormons, with Sun Myung Moon. There are a lot of things out there that say they respect the Bible, but their prophet is above. So first, when Jesus was challenged, why should we believe you? What did he say? John the Baptist. John the Baptist testified for me. You've already spoken to him. You know he's done that. And that was a living prophet that everyone respected. And he testified in favor of Jesus. How many times do we see that, folks? Number 2, Jesus said, look at the miracles I'm doing. You know, that is a testimony of itself. And what I like about these first 2 reasons is both of them are within the Quran and with Islam. John the Baptist, who testified for Jesus, of course, brother, you know, that's Yahya, and he is respected even in Islam. So that makes that a good apologetic. The second one is the miracles, and we know the Quran admits Jesus did miracles, that he was wonderful at that. Now, the third thing Jesus said was his proof, maybe many of you can guess or you remember from John 5, it's the prophecies. And there's some of that in Islam. I mean, they've heard that Jesus is the Messiah. They don't really know what that means. But the prophecies, the way I say it is the prophecies of Jesus are so strong that even the basic ones are incredibly difficult to fulfill. I say not like the prophecies of some other people. So friends, you see how I've used John 5 very neutrally with those 3 things. And the way I say you tailor these a bit for your audience, if you're talking to, like I meet some very sweet young women that, you know, are here from overseas studying, or even some other young people, I'm going to say it very gently. But when I have people coming at me like this, like I've had in Islamic institutes, and some of the hard guys and the debaters and say the stuff on Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, you're not always so soft. So then what I will do is take those same 3, and rather than being sweet, I will totally sweet. I mean, speak the truth in love, Cynthia. But number 1, when I say Jesus had John the Baptist testify for him, Yahya, I will say that was a living prophet. Muhammad didn't have that. So I will make it pointed more against Islam. Like, no, but Jesus had it. Muhammad didn't. Number 2, the miracles, I will say, you know, there's some debate whether Muhammad had any miracles or not, but there's no way he had the kind of miracles of Jesus. So I will draw the contrast. And number 3, about the prophecies, if I'm being firm, I will say I've read the prophecies about Muhammad in the Bible. I've been reading them since I was a kid. They never occurred to us that they were going to be another person, whereas the prophecies about Jesus are really clear. So I will say, in order for me to follow another religion, your religion, or any religion, the proof for that new religion, new deen, new way needs to be as strong or stronger than these 3 proofs that Jesus gave. And I just don't see that. So do you want to talk about presenting the apologetics, and then we'll talk about how you kind of pull it together in an conclusion and a conclusion?
I want you to continue presenting. I'll interject. Again, I apologize. I am still not at my top game so far.
I'm so sorry. Okay, brother. I just don't want to motor mouth through it all and give you
no. I will interject.
Opinion as the host.
Yes,
so jump in anytime.
I appreciate that. So you mentioned something about blood sacrifice, and that's a very powerful example. And I tell you why, whether from the Bible or the Quran, believe it or not. So for instance, when people argue that there was no blood sacrifice until a later time, and I hear this sometimes from Christians, believe it or not, the blood sacrifice was instituted immediately after the fall in the garden. How do we know this? Because the last 2 verses of chapter 3 of Genesis tells us that God clothed them, made a garment of skin for both Adam and Eve. How did that happen? He had to slaughter an animal for that to happen. Now, just sticking with the Quran did talk about them being clothed also with a cloth of righteousness, technically speaking. What an amazing connection now to the gospel right there. And then if we would use the Quran alone, because Genesis 4 there's sacrifices, and you get to Noah and there are sacrifices, and you get to Abraham and there are sacrifices, and then speaking of Abraham, God asked him to take his son, his only son Isaac, to sacrifice him. What did the Quran say about that when it comes to the son of Abraham? Granted, they argue that it's Ishmael. The Quran is silent, never said the name. The commentators believe it was Isaac, and later they changed their mind a couple of hundred years later to call him Ishmael. It says that we have substituted for him with a greater sacrifice. It did not say a lamb. It says a greater sacrifice. So believe it or not, some of the commentators will say this is a lamb that came from heaven, actually. It's amazing. So yes, just talking about things like this, it does open the door for discussions.
I don't know if you ever read Don Richardson's Eternity in Their Hearts, but that was a really
I do have that
breaking book for me. And he said, with every culture, there's a, quote, redemptive analogy, meaning there's something in that culture that you can use as an analogy to explain the gospel. And in Islam, I really feel that the Eid al-Adha, the sacrifice of Abraham, is one of the best. And that's kind of what we use as the conclusion for the invitation in both our green booklet on Path of the Prophets and the video, because it's so powerful.
Absolutely. And I appreciate Bart Conley here using the exact phrase, the translation of the Arabic. The Arabic says, وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذَبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ, and the word is ransomed him. I mean, this is like a very important language when it comes to salvific or our salvation. There is a ransom, substitutionally atonement taking place here.
Exactly. So we use that analogy whenever we can. And when I share the gospel, of course, I'm going through the whole Path of the Prophets, all the sacrifices, the concept of substitution, and the prophecies that it would be Jesus. In this particular tool, the PAT, I'm using it basically to point out the difference with Islam and the fact that Islam says it's related to the previous monotheistic religions, but it doesn't have this key thing. So it's just using it in another way. Of course, I believe sharing the gospel is the most important thing, but this particular tool is to help them see why you don't follow Islam and make them think about the things that you have told them. They can't shoot it down in that you say, this is what is convincing to me. So they can say, that doesn't convince me. You say, fine, it doesn't convince you, but it convinces me. So it stands.
Exactly. I agree with you. Even when they argue back, I mean, to be honest, I think this is just my experience. Rarely that they will argue back when it's neutral like this, benign approach.
Right.
And also when you use personal experience, I mean, they feel like, okay, who am I to attack your personal experience, And oftentimes, just by approaching them that way and showing that you do have knowledge of what the Quran teaches, for instance, or what the Hadith teaches, it puts them in a corner where they feel embarrassed to try to argue back, because they're going to expose themselves that they don't have the knowledge that you even just exhibited about their own faith. Yet at the same time, you're not really arguing with them or attacking them or anything like that. So they're trying to avoid, appearing as if they want to run away from the discussion.
Right. You're giving them something to think about, and it's not an argument. You're not attacking them. You're just saying, this is what works for me, kind of, as we would say in modern slang, what it works for me. This is what works for me. This is what I find convincing. But as far as you're saying about, about how they feel about it and how you feel about it, one of the questions that we have used with Muslims is, what blesses you in Islam? Wow, that's another tool on its own, because it does get them thinking about it. And usually they're kind of like stuttering, well, what blesses you in Christianity? Boom, there's your door. That's exactly for what you want to share with gospel and love of God and the teachings of the Bible. So that's slightly off topic, but it is a really valuable thing that also connects into the feeling part of it that we talk about in a presentation. You want to have ethos, logos, pathos. Don't let those words upset you, folks. It's just who you are, the message that you bring, and the feeling with it. So that question of what blesses you in Islam is connecting with the feeling part of it. And it's sad but true, and maybe it's not sad, maybe it's just true, that many people who follow Islam do not find it a blessing. They find it an obligation. Okay, well, let's go to the closing of this. And just as a reminder, since we don't have visual slides, I'm going to repeat things quite often. You want to have your opening, which is your personal connection with Islam, Arabic, culture, whatever. Then you state 2 or 3 strong reasons, which are apologies, apologetic. That's where you go back in your shelf and pull out the things that really have worked for you over the years, that are your top ones, 2 or 3. And then you will close. And friends, I'm going to give you a chance to give your preference. Now, depending on who you're talking to, you may or may not want to include your preference. Your preference is what you personally like. Now, I say beware with this, because we want people to know that the gospel and the Bible are based on facts. It's not just feeling. But in order to bring out that pathos part of your argument, the feeling, there are times you're going to want to include this. And I feel it is a powerful point. So for example, if I decide to conclude with my preference, I will say, but if all of the things were equal, if the proof for Christianity was the same as that for Islam, I admit that I prefer Christianity. Okay, well, they might accuse you of that anyway. Well, you just like it better. You can admit it, but you have to keep it in a little box. You can't make that take over your whole pat. But you can, like for me, I will say, yeah, I do prefer a God of love. I do prefer not being a sex slave in heaven for eternity. I do believing men and women are equal. So you can bring in those kind of little apologetic things there that are just what you prefer. That's not essential, but a lot of times that helps add to it. And then finally, you just wrap it up together and say, those are what I find the most compelling reasons that I follow the Bible and Jesus instead of Muhammad in the Quran. Or as some of the great debaters say, I believe the weight of the evidence favors. And why I like doing it this way, Al-Fadi and viewers, is you're at this point evaluating it. You're not saying they have no good points. If you tell people they have no good points, you're losing it. every religion has some good things in it. Every belief system has some good things. Now, in certain ones, you have to look very hard, but there are good things in Islam. You're not saying there's nothing good in Islam. You're not saying they can't bring up a good point, but you are simply saying, I believe the weight of the evidence, that means the best points, the heaviest points, the weight of the evidence favors Christianity.
Amen.
So, folks, is how I do a pat to Islam.
Amen. I'm going to speak in Arabic and in Hijazi right now. So we have someone by the name of Hijazi Goh. Hijazi Goh, لو انت صحيح حجازي اتكلم معانا بالعربي، خلينا نشوف الحجازيه حقتك، وفي نفس الوقت انا ابغى ادعيك تيجي معانا هنا. ايش رايك تدخل البرنامج الان؟ ندخلك معانا تتكلم معانا، او اسوي برنامج معاك لوحدنا. احنا كفار على عيني وراسي. عارف ليه احنا كفار؟ علشان تركنا دينك اللي ما يدينا اي شيء. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, good. So that's a pat to Islam. Brother, would you include different, like maybe just to flesh this out a little, we can maybe people on the chat will give reasons why what they put in their PAT, or maybe you want to say something about your PAT.
No, you keep going.
We keep going. Okay, well, if we don't have any questions on that, if we have time, do we want to talk about doing a PAT for atheists?
I would say, yeah, there is. I mean, I want to cater to Islam. So there is this movement now that many young Muslims claiming to be atheists, for instance.
Yes.
And even New Age. So I don't know how long this will take us. So go ahead and jump into atheists. And if we run out of time, we can always come back and visit New Age, because this is a new thing that it's been happening among many young Muslims.
Absolutely. We see the same thing, brother. And so, yeah, we can be glad that they're leaving Islam, and hopefully that will cut down on the violent tendencies. But, we've seen some harsh things from atheists too in the last several years. So,
yeah, and speaking of that, for the benefit of those who are joining us, we are releasing as we speak right now. I think we are in episode 3, or coming up episode 3. Myself and David Wood, we did a series on atheism and Islam. So that would be helpful, hopefully, for people.
Yeah, that is really helpful. And I think this might be able to hand in glove with that, to dovetail with it, because you guys are giving, the background and some reasons. And then maybe this will help people put it in a usable format, because we all run across secularists and atheists now. And so much of the general, say, university population, they're not totally sure what they believe, but because of the way they've been taught science, etc., they have an inclination to be atheists. So we really need to share with them why we believe in God. So if we go with the same format, PAT, personal, apologetic, and then testimony, I guess we could say the testimony thing is at the end, where you testify that this is convincing to you. So our first part with the atheists, again, is personal. This is to help them understand where you're coming from, and also that it's personal, so they can't really dispute it. Now, I don't know that your viewers will have as easy a way to connect with it as I do. I'm sure they have some way, but my way, of course, is because I'm a medical doctor. I have a science background. And I will ask your viewers to think, how do they connect with atheism? What is their background? Luke, whom I did a filming with the other day's engineering background. We do have a lot of people in science that are doing apologetics. But the average person may not have a science background, but they know what's convincing to them where they are. So if they are talking to someone else, I mean, maybe it's high school educated mom to high school educated mom, or PhD to PhD, or whatever. But try to find something from your personal background that connects you to what you're going to share for why you believe in God. And I will say, for example, well, I have a medical background. I've studied science, and I've done a lot of work through the microscope. And the universe is very complex. And you can, a lot of people now know privileged planet kind of way to talk, and they can incorporate that into who they are. But for me, I say this is really complicated, and it's very hard for me to believe that that all happened without a God. Then I will start going in from there into my reasons, and I can use what I see through the microscope and the complexity, not just as who I am, but as my first reason that these things don't happen by accident. It's too complex. Oh, guys, this is one of my best examples. I also like archaeology. I've seen some shows where they take a little tiny piece of flint, maybe 2 to 3 millimeters in size, and based on that little piece of rock, they will say, this was made by a human being. This is evidence of human habitation. Can you see the irony here? So I would suggest that our friends come up with some analogy like that, that is amazing to them. I mean, how can these scientists say a little piece of rock with a chip on it that shows that they were doing some what they call napping, trying to make a tool, a little tiny piece of rock? Or you've heard that, the watch in the desert. But here's this whole universe we're supposed to believe just came from nothing. And, if it took a human being to make a little chip on a rock, how did this come by accident? So I think that's one of the first things that most of us could use is the complexity, and then contrast it with something very simple in everyday life that we know was not just an accident. Now, the second thing I will give you as my apologetic is a little specific, but it's fantastic. I don't know if your people can use it. Certainly, if you have any science background viewers watching it or any chemists, this will be strong. And friends, I did not know this when I was a chemistry major in university. I wish I had. I didn't hear of it until maybe 10 years after I graduated from a Swiss PhD was talking about this. And it totally clicked with me because as a physician and a chemist, we know that every chemical rotates to the right or to the left. Okay, it rotates. In other words, it rotates light or it has a twist. You've all seen pictures of DNA and the spiral. Well, pretty much all chemicals, those in the human body, those in life, all have a configuration which spins one way or the other. Now, they misquote in science an early experiment, the Miller experiment from the 1950s, where they created an artificial environment and something popped into it with nitrogen for a couple of seconds. And they said, see, we can make life out of nothing. Well, friends, that didn't happen. And not only they've never been able to make life, these compounds lasted only a couple seconds. And this is the clincher where the rotation, you can remember perhaps rotation, how that fits. It's totally impossible for chemicals to line up without an outside source if they rotate light. And the way I would ask you to think about it is pretend that you had a set of gloves, all the rights were red and all the blues were left. If you put them in the dryer and you open it up, you're not going to have all the right red socks or gloves lined up and all the left blue socks lined up. No, They're going to mix. And this is the huge, huge, huge thing that nobody can explain. Now, how can we get around that? How do we get around that in life? Well, we have more sophisticated compounds. A lot of people have heard of catalysts. There are enzymes that make all this happen. But randomly, if you have a primordial soup, which they talk about, randomly, you're not going to have all the right-sided chemicals line up and all the left. No, it takes an outside energy source. This is extremely convincing to me as a chemistry major physician. All the drugs have a configuration. All of the, like I did a recent continuing medical education unit a couple of days ago on COVID. A lot of the new changes are about the configuration of the attachment of COVID. So this configuration is key to every living chemical, and that cannot happen randomly. So for me, that's probably the most powerful thing. Do you have a comment on that before I give my third?
Absolutely. And I tell you the answer, of course, for us as believers, we know the answer to this amazing coherence and sustainability of these atoms and objects that are rotating, and yet they're still also in the same orbits, in their same organized fashion, and so on and so forth. There is one simple answer. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. That's the answer to that.
Exactly. Without that, gravity wouldn't work. Nothing would work. The Big Bang, sometimes they're like, well, how does that happen? It all pushes out. All of these powers are supernatural. We're not just trying to be God of the gaps. And I know we get, accused of that. Well, just because you can't figure it out. But the idea that the complexity comes from nowhere, that things are going to organize themselves without catalysts or outside energy, these are extreme, extreme examples. So there is a third one, which you might say is positive instead of just the gods of the gap. What I use, what I found is really powerful, is reality. Reality. And that might not immediately appear to our viewers to be a great apology, but brother, it is, because people are aware of the idea of reality. And they want mostly to be in touch with reality. Now, when we look at scientific materialism or atheistic materialism versus Eastern religions, they have different views on this. And the bottom line for this apology is only the biblical worldview fits with both the material and the spiritual. And that's the reality that everybody knows. So I would like to give Nancy Pearcey, an apologist who I think is excellent. And she's not with Islam, but she points out something that's called cognitive dissonance. Probably your people have heard that at another time. And that just means two things that you're holding true that don't make sense. So what we're trying to do with this is help atheists on the one side and New Age, Eastern religion on the other, but help at this point the atheists confront the fact that the world is not just material, because we know the Bible tells us in the beginning God created, and then he put his image into humans. And so we have the physical world that God created, plus the spiritual, the intangible part of reality that we can't see. And for example, it skips me the name right now, but one of the big atheists said, when I look at my daughter, I feel that there's something more to her than just physical. But I know that's just illusion because everything is just matter. So even people who believe that everything is matter have this sense that there's something else. A lot of the new trend is to be transgender, intersexual, all of that. Well, this plays into that also. If you are an atheist materialist, maybe a godless evolutionist, and your body tells you you're male or female, what's telling you you're not? How can you have a sense that you're something else? No, you're only physical. You are just what the physical body says. And that goes for everything else in the universe if you believe that atheistic materialism. So you can talk to people in that way and help them confront the things that they believe that aren't just strictly material. So that's the third thing I think is very good to work with atheists and skeptics. Number one being the complexity. Number two, chemistry, medicine, life, how do things work? And number three, reality. Now, I will say there are so many good reasons, and I know someone else I might be with, say, for example, Luke would say, oh, it's the origin of life or the development of conscience or consciousness even. And probably our viewers have other good ideas. That's great. It's probably better if you don't use my ideas because you want this to be authentic and personal. But those are my three ideas. And then, friends, as I said, we're going back to a little bit of personal preference at the end. If you feel it's appropriate, if you think they're going to derail it and say, yeah, that's just what you want or think. No, but if possible, so if I'm sharing with an atheist, I might say, and you know, although I think the evidence for God is really strong, I do actually like the idea of a God of love who cares for everyone and who knows we're not perfect, who entered creation, died in our place, and asks us to walk with him every day. So that's where we present our preference in a way that is tender, maybe a bit emotional, we might say, the pathos again, or the pathos of it, to make your argument strong. And then you can end that way. You know, I believe the weight of the evidence strongly favors the existence of God. And I really do like it. I like that there is a God of love.
Amen. Amen. Well, I think that was an excellent, set of examples. So, is there anything else you want to add to this approach, or a reminder to our viewers? Meanwhile, I'm going to ask if anyone have any specific questions about what you've heard. Feel free to please put it right here, and we will read it as soon as we see it.
Sure. Well, I think that gives them the idea. I hope I've been repetitive enough that they can walk away and remember what personal apologetic testimony is, that they will think about it through the night or maybe on the weekend when they have a chance. It would be ideal if they would write it down, their P, their personal connection with what they're going to say. The A, their 2 or 3 top apologies, top facts that convince them. And then number 3, their testimony of how they put it together, either how their preference is with or without that, but definitely saying, this is what convinces me. This is the weight of the evidence. So hopefully you remember that PAT. You can make your pat and get it down pat. And then you will be so excited, friends. If you pray that God will give you an opportunity to use it, He will. And think about the people you're with. They may not be just Muslims and atheists, maybe something else. I don't think we have time to get to those today. But now that you know how to make a pat, you can make it for anything, even for children, why you believe in God.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, I want to give our viewers right now who are joining us live the opportunity to ask any question or comment, maybe if you have a comment about the approach in a way that you would like for us to interact with that comment, make it just very clear, and we will do so. Just to wait and see if anyone would be asking. A reminder again about your website, your YouTube
Thank you
channel,
very
the type of tools and videos people can benefit from as well.
Thanks so much for giving me an opportunity to share that, because what we are trying to do through the website is two things. One, it is for Muslim seekers to go there and get some questions answered. Basically, we have some apologetics. We don't focus on it like Brother Al-Fadi does, but we're more how you explain these things to Muslims. So whether it's Christmas, Easter, why we believe the Bible, the Christian life, those things that if you are a Muslim who's recently become a Christian and you speak English, we only have a little bit of Arabic on the website, but if you speak English, then that is a place where you can go. And we do have some people in Saudi Arabia and other countries that are discipling through this because they can't go to church. They can't get training other ways. So if you go to christianfrommuslim.com, if you're Muslim, you can get a discipleship class in that. Now, if you're a Christian, you can also get training. On the lessons page, you can get basically a full college course in working with Muslims, building bridges, sharing truth, challenging falsehood. And you can either just watch one episode on basic Islam, or you can take all 35 episodes. Even Christian colleges can use it. Our study guide is divided up for each lesson. Altogether, it's over 500 pages. So it's a full textbook on how you can evangelize and disciple Muslims. So that's what it's for. We also have a lot of free tools there. If you go to resources, you can download the Path of the Prophets. I think we have it currently in 7 languages there. We have other tracks you can use. It's near Christmas now. We have the Jesus of Christmas for Muslims. You can download free. And we do have the Path of the Prophets video on the homepage. We've got testimonies and other things. So that would be great. If you'd like to go there and check it out for discipleship or training, it doesn't cost anything. So every church in America can get free training. And it's not just me, there are other leaders on it teaching.
Amen. There's a question, I think it's more of a generic question here, so I'm going to take a shot at it. The person here, Arwanda Jr., is saying how can or why would the Muslims in this case become atheists? I would say it's just they're being disillusioned by what's going on, I mean, with Islam. And in their mind, they feel like if I leave Islam, somehow I'm an atheist now. That's most of the time, that's how they think. But it's really hard for a Muslim mind to assess the process, or I should say, convince themselves that there is no God. I mean, you've been living all of your life believing in a God, and now you're disillusioned by this God, and you want to leave the faith that this God has instituted for you. I don't think atheism for Muslim backgrounds is the same as Western atheism. And that's exactly what we did, me and David Wood, in the series to try to distinguish between the two. But would you like to add more to that?
Oh, me? Yes. Actually, I think that Muslims are, I know you know this, you probably said it in a way, but they're so tied into the concept that Muhammad was the last prophet, and that's what validates the truth of God and of all of the prophets, that when that is shaken, it's so earth-shattering that they think there might not be God. And let me give you an example of how this happened in real time. I mentioned that I wrote a book about 10 years ago exposing the origin of the Quran. I think I actually have sent that to you, Brother Al. But I had a series of interviews. One of them was with BBC South Asia. I was interviewed by a Muslim interviewer, and he said to me, "So are you saying that if the Quran, the final revelation from God, has been changed, it is not perfect, are you saying there's no God?" And for me, I thought, wow, you see, that is the Muslim mindset. they are so convinced that the Quran is right, Muhammad is the last prophet, this has been preserved, this is the true revelation, that when that is shattered, and there is such good evidence out there, even 10 years ago when that book was published, and now of course there's more, that it changes your whole worldview. So I think that's what they're going through. Is that pretty much what you have mentioned in your other?
That is, definitely that's one important reason why, this is their world. Leaving that world to them means, oh, okay, so there is no God now. When in fact they're still struggling, like they still have moral values. They still know right from wrong. They understand, the difference between what is mercy and what is evil, and so on and so forth. But they're just struggling with the fact that they don't like this God that they were following, because of the same reason, this morality in them trumps this God. I mean, they have a higher sense of morality than the God that they're following, if you wish. And the good news is they come to Christ. I mean, I prayed with one of them, and this person came to Christ. So there is always hope, for them. But we just need to meet them at their level first and help them begin to make the distinction between you are leaving a worldview and come into the truth versus you're leaving a God that is not even there. He doesn't even exist, actually. I mean, that's what's so interesting. You're following something that didn't even exist in the first place. And of course, we need to be gentle with them. We need to be kind, and we need to appreciate the fact that they're being honest about their feelings. And, and sometimes I feel like they call themselves atheists because it's a fad, it's just a fashion, statement they want to associate with the West. And that's one of those.
And it's not as dangerous, right, to say you're atheist than to say you're Christian.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know a number of Saudis, by the way, who are openly talking about the fact that they're atheists, and their family will be shaking their heads like, okay, it's just a phase. They'll snap out of it. But dare you say you got baptized and follow Jesus and see what happens?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We would usually think that it would be worse to change, to leave belief in God than to change religion, but that's not the way they see it. So I think what you're saying is we're both kind of saying the exposure. One is if you find out the Quran isn't real, and the other is, like you're saying, when you find out all these things, whether it's the morality of the Prophet of Islam, or whether other things coming out about where was Mecca, where was historical Muhammad, that's another kind of exposure, that all these things, maybe it's different for each person. When I was in London at Nabil Qureshi's debate about the Quran, around the time that book came out, I did want to see the reaction on the audience. And I was with a woman at break time, and she was so shaken. She said, this was a Muslim woman, and she said, when something you've believed all your life is shown to be false, she just put her head down and grabbed a handful of water and splashed it on her face and said, oh, yeah. Yes. I hope that she went forward from that to the truth of the gospel, but it's just life-shattering.
Absolutely. And I remember Dr. J. Smith also telling me allegedly something happened in Canada when Francois Derouche, who is a scholar in early Islamic manuscripts, was talking about one of those early Quranic manuscripts, showing some variants in it and changes, and comparing it to the Quran in our hand today, known as the 1924 Cairo edition. And he said a Muslim woman in the audience, after he finished, she was shaken. She couldn't believe what she just witnessed. And he felt like her faith was just shattered. And she kept telling him, please tell me this is not my Quran. Please tell me, And he said he felt so bad. Indeed, it's your world that is being shattered, and that's why we need to be careful, when we present these things. It's not like we're mocking the person or we're laughing. No, we're presenting it in a way to help them make that leap to the truth. And that's not an easy task unless if you're guided by the Holy Spirit.
We need to do that, brother. You remember that. I mean, may our viewers remember what you said we need to speak the truth in love. We need to care for these people. They are victims of this brainwashing of something that's terrible. And yet some of them know, like some of the people we mutually know that were former Muslims, they sensed there was something good about God, even though they were raised in this. And sometimes when they leave Islam, that faith that there is something good about God does help sustain them through, so they don't go to atheism. But it is really hard. And when we share with them, we need to keep that in mind. Think of it as like if you're telling one of your family members that they have cancer, you want to do it really gently. And if you can't talk to them that way, go back in your car and pray until you can, or drive home. We need to love that person and not be like, ha, I'm right. And sometimes I feel that there are apologists and Christians like that. It's not about us being right. It's about us being vessels to bring the truth of God and his love to people that he loves, that have been imprisoned in darkness and away from it.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. Well said. Well, it looks like this is all we have, and I don't want to keep you waiting much longer. I know maybe sometimes the timing when we choose it can make a difference in terms of the audience and the questions. But I would love really for you to come back again to continue with the discussions about street apologetics and any other tools. But here's something I'm going to offer this to you right now. I'm going to mention to people the week between Christmas and New Year's. I have every intention, Lord willing, if I live until then and I have the energy, to have a live stream, sort of a panel, basically open panel reflection on the goodness of God in our life. I'm going to invite former Muslims who can join us, who are followers of Christ, and those who are working among them. So you are one of those that I would love to extend the invitation. If you can join in, even for a few minutes, I'll tell people, pop in for a few minutes and leave. It doesn't have to be the full live stream. I'm going to ask those who are working among them, like George Sayegh and others as well. And I'm hoping that we will get enough people to where we can have a wonderful reflection on the goodness of God from our perspective. For me, coming from Christ, from Islam to Christ, for you working among Muslims and seeing the transformation that is taking place in their worldviews and their cultures and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much what I'm really hoping to do. This is my extended invitation publicly. You don't have to respond to it, of course, but I'm just saying I want to do this. The Lord put it on my heart. I've already approached one person, Sister Khadija, and she's on board to do this. I'm going to approach a couple of others. I don't want to name them yet because what if they can't? I don't want to put them on the spot. But this time I
want to do it, if we have a mutually convenient day. So
absolutely. So and that's the thing. Yeah, we will try to do it in a time that's what I'm trying to do, a time and a date and a length of live stream to where allows people even just to pop in for a few minutes, say hello, reflect on things, and leave. I mean, I want it to be casual. I don't want it to be formal, basically. Wonderful.
Sure. Good.
Well, thank you so much, of course, as always. And thank you for all of you who are joining us. And we appreciate, of course, our moderators. By the way, our moderators, you are welcome to that particular panel. But remember, one of you suggested that we have a live stream just with the moderators. My offer is still out there. I haven't heard from a single one. I guess my moderators don't like me, Dr. Cynthia, for some reason. I don't know why.
No, they just don't want to bother you when your health is down.
Yeah, the Lord is good. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thanks
and thank you, everyone. This is Al Fadi, over and out. God bless.